biggest palace complex in the world, almost 10,000 rooms, so big that it's a city unto itself, all built for one man. For 500 years, it was the seat of the most powerful man on earth. He had absolute power over life and death. Until the 20th century, entry to the inner precincts was prohibited to any male but the emperor and eunuchs. To trespass in his palace had but one single result: death. The name of the palace inspired fear. 24 Chinese emperors called it home. Their subjects called it something else: the Forbidden City. Its closed doors open for us as we go deep inside China's Forbidden City. The Forbidden City was one of the most secret places on Earth. Even today, while it attracts 8 million visitors a year, only a small part of it is open to public. But on the eve of the 600th anniversary of its construction, all of it is open to our cameras. Between 1407 and 1420, up to 1 million convict and conscript laborers did the heavy work, while 100,000 skilled craftsmen did the fine detail. It is the biggest palace complex still standing in China. It had to be big because it was the home of a god. The Chinese emperor was more than just a ruler. To the people of imperial China, he was a divine being. To them, he was the son of heaven, the pivot between this world and the celestial. They believed the supreme deity lived in a 10,000-room palace on the pole star. The son of heaven had his palace on earth. And legend has it, being a good son, his palace, the Forbidden City, had only 9,999 rooms. As the son of heaven, the Chinese emperor's actions could make the sun rise and the crops grow. His palace, the Forbidden City, was both the seat of government and a sacred place. The ancient Chinese believed that just as the pole star palace of the supreme deity is the center of the heavens, the Forbidden City is the center of the world. To the Chinese, it was the navel of the world. The start of the 15th century was a chaotic time in China. The victorious Chinese army had only recently pushed the Mongols back over the Great Wall. But now the country was at war again. China was torn asunder when a prince from the north rebelled against the emperor in the south. The prince was Zhu Di. He seized the throne, but his problems weren't over. He had conquered the capital, Nanjing, but he still had powerful enemies there. Executions of his opponents did not solve his problems. An assassination attempt showed Zhu Di just how dangerous the old capital, Nanjing, remained for him. Haunted by the ghosts of his opponents, he sought a way out. It wasn't only problems in Nanjing that gave Zhu Di sleepless nights. Mongol armies were again on the march. threatening to breach the Great Wall. Zhu Di found a radical solution for both his problems. He abandoned Nanjing and created a new capital in the north. It was a massive undertaking. By the time it was done, millions of people would move to Beijing, building one of the greatest cities of all time. Zhu Di was a ruthless but gifted ruler and a megalomaniac. He never did anything small. At the same time that he started building a new capital in the north, he equipped a huge armada of ships to sail the western seas. The ships were the largest wooden vessels ever built. The biggest had 9 masts and carried 1,000 people. And the fleet he assembled was 300 ships. It was the biggest armada in history until the Second World War. The fleet was commanded by the eunuch admiral Zheng He. Its voyages went on for 28 years. But while the ships were at sea, Zhu Di had even bigger projects at home. He had the Grand Canal rebuilt and the Great Wall extended. But his most enduring project was to tear down Kublai Khan's old palace in Beijing and build a new one in its place. For almost 100 years, the heirs of Genghis Khan had their capital at Beijing. The old palace wasn't good enough for Zhu Di. He had it razed to make way for a new one. The rubble was used to make a mountain that overlooked the new palace complex. The construction of the new palace took 14 years. By the time it was done, it was set to have 1,000 buildings and over 9,000 rooms. For 500 years, its name would be spoken with awe. It was called the Forbidden City. At the very heart of Beijing is a large rectangle, 3/4 of a kilometer wide and nearly a kilometer deep. High walls and a wide moat separate it from the rest of Beijing. The walls enclosed an immense space, 720,000 square meters. 437 White Houses, that's more than 100 football pitches, could fit in its grounds. From the 15th century to the 20th, the Forbidden City was the hub of the Chinese Empire. It was the home of 24 emperors, the seat of government, the heart of a civilization. Beijing was a city of walls. The Forbidden City was a city within a city. Like nested boxes, deep inside one walled city, Beijing, was another walled city, the Imperial City, reserved just for the royal family and the highest members of society. And inside the Imperial City was another walled city, the most secret, the most exclusive place in China, a place where mistaken entry could mean death, the Forbidden City. Hidden behind its high, impenetrable walls, life in the Forbidden City assumed mythic qualities. The only thing that most people outside the city could see were the gold-colored roofs of the highest buildings soaring above the walls. For them, the Forbidden City was the ultimate mystery destination. We can go where they could not. On the eve of the 600th anniversary of its construction, no door is closed to us as we reveal the secrets of the Forbidden City. In 1407, Europe was recovering from the plague. In Mexico, the Aztecs were building an empire. And in Beijing, preparations began on the Forbidden City. It would take almost 10 years just to gather the necessary building materials and to assemble the workers. Little is known of most of the men who did the actual work. Their names are a mystery to us. Even some of the building techniques they used remain a mystery. Yet these master architects and craftsmen built a palace of enduring beauty. The Forbidden City is the largest wooden palace complex in the world. At its heart are the three great halls. They stand on high white marble terraces that raise them more than 2 stories above the courtyard, humbling all who see them. More than 1,000 carved marble dragons drain rainwater away from the huge terraces. The palace complex is an architectural masterpiece. It is on the United Nations list of World Heritage Sites. The Forbidden City was conceived on the grand scale. Visitors had to walk down a majestic ceremonial avenue just to get to it. They passed through 3 gates. The most famous is Tiananmen Gate. But even larger is the Meridian Gate, which pierces the wall that surrounds the Forbidden City. The Meridian Gate is the main entrance to the Forbidden City. As tall as a 12-story building, it is the tallest gate in Beijing. The Hall of Supreme Harmony was the most important building in the Forbidden City, and at half the size of a football pitch, the biggest. Sitting on 3 white marble terraces, it was built to humble all who saw it. The building, like all the buildings in the Forbidden City, is made of wood. Although it was the most important throne room in the palace complex, the largest imperial audiences took place not inside the building, but in the vast courtyard outside. Thousands of officials would gather there to hear imperial proclamations. Audience days started in the dead of night. Government officials, called mandarins, would begin to gather at 3 a.m. At 4, the palace gates would open and they would file in. Although they were the highest officials in the land, they walked in near silence. There were heavy penalties for talking, coughing, or spitting. There were 9 ranks, or grades, of mandarins. Their rank was designated by the color of the button on their hat and by the square emblems on their clothes. A different kind of bird, from crane for the highest rank to a flycatcher for the lowest, was embroidered on their official robes. Conscientious emperors took audience days seriously. But not all the emperors were conscientious. A notoriously dissolute emperor once failed to show up at all. His mandarins waited all day before the assembly was cancelled. One of the hungry and thirsty ministers was crushed to death in the rush to leave. The Forbidden City is divided into two sections, the inner court and the outer court. The main entry to the palace was from the south. Furthest from the entry gate was the inner court. It was the residential part of the palace. The outer court was the official part of the palace. The most important state ceremonies took place in its halls and courtyards. The Hall of Supreme Harmony is the largest and most splendid building in the Forbidden City. The key events in the life of the empire took place here. Behind the Hall of Supreme Harmony was the smaller, square-shaped Hall of Middle Harmony. And behind that was the Hall of Preserving Harmony. These three great halls were used only for the most important ceremonies and events. The enthronement of a new emperor, his wedding, celebration of the Lunar New Year all took place here. The vast Hall of Supreme Harmony's own history is less than harmonious. Disasters struck the hall with alarming regularity. Many times in its history, it was victim of catastrophic fires. As the tallest building in the Forbidden City, it was frequently hit by lightning. The first time was just 100 days after the building was officially opened in 1421. The building sat a burned-out hulk for 18 years. Special trees, called Nanmu, provided the timber for the building. They were only found in southwestern China. Getting them was a hazardous occupation. It was said at the time that 1,000 men went into the forest, but only 500 came out. Monsoon rains were used to get the logs down from the mountains. The logs were floated downstream. In a famous legend, a Nanmu log crashed into a boulder with a sound like a thunder, smashing the rocks to pieces. When the current was against them, the floating logs were dragged upstream. The journey of a single log took up to 4 years. 100,000 Nanmu logs were used in the construction of the Forbidden City. Nanmu wood was the most important building material. Each of the pillars that are the main supports of the Hall of Supreme Harmony is hewn from a single tree. The pillars that surround the throne get special treatment. The texture on the pillars is not the tree's bark, but gilded dragons that wind sinuously around the pillars. The Forbidden City has many throne rooms. The grandest was in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Both the hall and the throne are heavily decked out in gold. The throne is made of gilded rosewood. It is surrounded by incense burners and perfumers. There are thrones in other audience halls. They are all covered with dragons.